Welcome to the Viewless Wings Poetry Podcast, where we celebrate the craft of poetry. Each week we feature interviews with incredible poets, songwriters, and artists, including Olivia Gatwood, Safia El Hilo, Dana Joya, and many more. We also feature periodic submitted poetry episodes. Visit viewlesswings.com to submit your original poetry. I'm your host, James Moorhead, Poet Laureate of Dublin, California, and author of Canvas, Portraits of Red and Gray, and The Plague Doctor. Hit subscribe and follow me on Instagram or Threads at Viewless Wings. On this week's episode of the Viewless Wings Poetry Podcast, we are featuring poems submitted to Viewless Wings and read by the authors. We love providing a platform for poets to share their words on viewlesswings.com and their voices on the Viewless Wings Poetry Podcast. Visit viewlesswings.com to learn more about how to submit your poem for a future episode, or find Viewless Wings on submittable.com. And now we turn the mic over to our first featured poet.
I am 41 years old, currently live in Berkeley, California, and have been published in Street Spirit newspaper, Free Magazine, the Cal State University Los Angeles newsletter, The Lake, and Poetry Row Collective. I have been writing poetry since I was 10 years old. I also operate a photography business focused on music, cultural events, and portraits called Esteban Photography. Thank God for Thanking God was written in 2018 after a visit from my sister and in the midst of this tumultuous time with our father, whom has always been pretty manipulative. One of those classically overly generous and cruelly withholding types. There was this sense that sometimes you have to let go of people, whether or not they're family, but still honor the memories of the good times. During this particular visit by my sister in spring, we drove out to see the California golden poppy fields, about 90 minutes from where I lived at the time, across the vast stretches of desert, only to find that we had missed the bloom. I have never been very religious, but when we got out there, despite being embarrassed, I still thought it was beautiful and holy, that the drive out together was really the point, and that sometimes it's the being open to being thankful that's really the thing that saves you after all. Thank God for thanking God. Stand up, and every so often remember to check in with every aching temple, with every poppy flower ruined, with every breath filled in smoke and seed and loss. Give the wind a name and send it on its way encouraged. Do not lift up the world, but release it scattering into the fields like dandelions or music. Stand up and give thanks for the worry, thanks for the doubt, thanks for the heartbreak, for they have helped find a way out of all this mess and into our own tender arms. So stand up and give thanks to the not working out, thanks to the too late, thanks to every blank page unfilled, the dusty trail, the fallen grace, the hunger. This is what we sing to. Not every curtain closed, but every window thrown wide open. And thank God for thanking God for this. When we are out in the wilderness, the wild will still pour out of us.
Hi, my name is Lucy Rattner. I'm a 20-year-old poet from New York. My work has been published in Midsummer Literary Magazine, Pinky Thinker Press, and Scribe Beer, as well as my self-published debut collection of poetry, The Soul is in the Stomach. I'm going to read a poem called Girlhood. It was inspired by all of the wonders and troubles that come with femininity. I hope you enjoy. Here we go. Girlhood was a dream that moved fast through my head and slipped away in the morning. It was tiny hands holding each other, hopscotch socials, dolls in the sand, moonlight manicures, and late-night euphoria, saving graces passed under bathroom stalls, lying on stomachs on pink frilly beds, telephone wires strung in hands. Did you see? Did you hear? Did you know? It was magazine horoscopes, jump rope love, and razor scooter bruises. The girl I was lives inside me, coiled like wire in my heart. She has peach juice dribbling down her chin. I wipe it away with tenderness. Girlhood does not become womanhood. Instead, they face each other with pride. Look at me. Look at what I've made. One is not without the other. My state of being, that of femininity, is a savior, telling me to cherish my treasures. I keep them in a jewelry box with a ballerina dancing on top. She whispers, laugh underneath the darkening sky, and smile for the camera. Of course I smile. How could I not? How could I not when cats purr, when sunsets exist, when fruits ripen? This is the stuff of girlhood. Laugh underneath the darkening sky, or laugh even though the sky is darkening and you are growing and the men are staring. And oh, how they stare. Eyes on autopilot, looking for any hint of flesh set to seek and destroy. It is when they first find purchase on you that you realize, and it's a realization that kills, hanging heavy in your heart. They can see my body, but not my soul. Bedrooms are where most of the mind takes place. It is where you first learn to love, and it is where you survive the harsh winter of your own head, the cruel whisper saying you are not enough and never will be. It is conditioned in us the second we first feel we are being looked at. And perhaps girlhood is a transition, from not knowing to knowing too much, from having never been kissed to having kissed everyone, to feeling one thing to feeling everything, from sleeping easy to lying awake at night in a canopy bed of wondering and looking back at everything you did wrong. So much wrong you've done. Wrong seeps out of your pores, hanging itself on the hook of your embarrassment. But there is right as well. Right is the way your friends love you, would do anything for you, will listen to you talk about your bad dates and difficult mother, your struggling and your sorrow. They dance with you on the highway pavement covered in rain, wet dress and all. And girlhood is remembering every painful little detail like a hymn you sung years ago, the way they laugh, the way they look at you, the way they hold you, or held you. Girlhood is thousands of goodbyes wrapped in pretty paper. Goodbyes move slowly and then in a rush. All of a sudden there is no more music and you must make do with the leaving. You must say farewell to your little girl body, your little girl toys, and your little girl books, the fireflies that sing in the night sky, your dad being strong enough to carry you, and your mom being soft enough to hold you. Once you learn to say goodbye, saying hello is addicting. Think of a girl who hasn't spent her whole life saying hello. You can't. Think of a girl who hasn't spent her whole life giving. You can't. Think of a girl who hasn't spent her whole life loving. You can't. Think of a girl who hasn't spent her whole life saying yes and swallowing no's. You can't, because every girl has spent her life opening her heart and letting it get crushed. Girlhood is a dream while waking, burrowing itself in your subconscious and peeking out when you think it's gone. It is love of life. It is love.
My name is Daude Teel, and I am a poet, proet, and playwright. The piece I will be reciting is heavily influenced by a story in the biblical Gospels, and it is titled Sins of Gold. A new sun climbed atop the sands. Mudded houses sit in rows, supplanted by mighty temples, synagogues dripping red, red like the ribbons of Rome, held together by mighty men, mighty beards dressed in white, standing by tables holding gold, tables with tablets and doves. Enough of these false men, lizards who use his name for profit, for money. How dare they, horrid men? By their lusts we shall meet our end. Doors flew open. Candles were silenced. Down the aisle roared a sun with no sandals, no sand, and no sweat. To those who chase this, I beseech you, rebel against your sinful ways. His rage danced effortlessly throughout the room. Mountains of gold toppled. Tables tipped, twisted, then crumbled. Shocked beards, wicked men, spineless men in robes of white, wailed, screamed, cursed, and wept. Our lives, my God, our gold. Arresting his wrath, a weariness overtook him. He moved towards the fallen, weeping beards, putrid tears from polluted men. Here, he said, sweatless since the day began, he dropped on each a bag of seeds. Here, try these instead.
I'm Derek Kannemeyer from Richmond, Virginia, where I've spent my working life as a high school teacher of French and English. Before that, I was from Cape Town, where I was born, then London, where I grew up, my family having fled South Africa to escape apartheid. Then for a couple of years after college, I was from Lille, France, where I met and married an American girl who got homesick. Hello, Virginia. Since 2018, I've published 2 poetry collections, a book of light verse, a full-length play, a novel, and a hybrid non-fiction photography tome, Unsay Their Names, which made it to Kirkus Review's list of 100 best indie books of 2022. My 2 poetry collections are Mutt Spirituals and You Go In by the Gate That Isn't There. I write across the poetic spectrum, autobiographically, lyrically, observationally, meditatively, and narratively for the joy of storytelling, and at some storytelling point, I began to write biographical snapshots of figures from history or contemporary culture as seen on some significant day in the month of April. Several of them are in the same stanzaic shape as this one, an unmetered 19-line form I call fidget form. Yuri in April, about the first human in space. Vladimir in April, about first human in space death. Valivuta in April is in the voice of the architect of apartheid. Eva in April tells of Eva Brown's wedding day and death day. Edward in April recounts the death of the poet Edward Thomas, etc. Yevgeny Evtushenko died on April the 1st. Poem, Prince died on a day when the Richmond winds were blowing white blossoms off the cherry trees. Sometimes it snows in April. And then the utterly fascinating Laura Keane, who is like me a transplanted Brit in America, and got herself into the history books on Good Friday, 1865, the April day when John Wilkes Booth assassinated Abraham Lincoln. What's undisputed, and this is pretty tangled, Laura Keane was the star and the driving force behind the play My American Cousin. On its closing night, Abraham and Mary Lincoln came to the Ford's Theatre to see her perform in it. Keane knew John Wilkes Booth, who was also an actor, and was the brother to Edwin Booth, like Keane, one of the finest actors of their age, and Keane's sometime co-star. They had even toured Australia together. Edwin Booth's career would be severely damaged by his brother's act, despite the fact that a few years earlier, in a train car incident, it was he who had saved the life of Robert Todd Lincoln, Lincoln's eldest son. Laura Keane, too, naturally came under suspicion by association and was accused of being a co-conspirator, but she acted vigorously to change that script. She claimed to have gotten into Lincoln's box at the theatre in time to hold him as he died, and there has been some corroborating testimony for this. It now, in fact, seems to be fairly generally accepted history. The blood-stained cuff of her dress is in the collection of the National History Museum of American History. But it is, nevertheless, disputed by some. Did she really cradle the dying president in her arms? Was this rather a publicity stunt or a tale concocted to clear Laura Keane from suspicion? And say she did exactly as she claimed, what exactly were her motives? She was a great actress. Was her grief real or a calculated act? I can't answer any of those questions. No one can. I couldn't, of course, even ask all of them in the course of my 19 lines. But the staged or not image of her and the dying Lincoln on Good Friday, 1865, in a Pieta pose, held me and shook me and wouldn't let go until I wrote this poem. Laura in April, Pieta, Ford's Theatre, 1865. Her birth name was Mary Moss. Laura Keane was an invention. What choice had she but the stage? The girl's father in penal Australia, his disgrace branding them with its lash. What chance but in a new name and remarriage to the theatre? A short bio. 2 decades on the stage in London, NYC, San Francisco, Baltimore, founding our own theatres, starring and managing the great Laura Keane. And the audiences came and came. New York, the Elves, a record 50 shows. London, the Colleen Bawn, 200. And in DC, transferred from the house that bore her name, the Laura Keane, to the Fords, our American cousin, to which a president came to see the famed Laura Keane. When Wilkes Booth's gunshot stopped the show, and the blood-soaked theatre of an epoch called her into its wings, she flew off stage after the follow spot, through a million hollering crowd, to take her mark. A scene so tender, in so theatrical a frame, the scale of it still tips. She kneels. She acts, haloed or human, to cradle a martyred man. She weeps, in Laura's or in Mary's name.
Hello, this is Alison Davis. I'm an educator, scholar, poet, and activist in Northern California in the United States. I have 2 forthcoming books of poetry, Wild Canvas with Finishing Line Press, which will be out in January, and A Rare But Possible Condition with Saddle Road Press, which will be out next summer. My scholarship covers a wide range of topics in the field of education, from critical media literacy to spiritual inquiry. Although I hold degrees in literary studies from very prestigious universities, I consider my willingness to be like Rumi and gamble everything for love as my greatest credential. You can follow me on Instagram at poems_and_pebbles. The poem I'm going to share today was inspired by the poet Katie McNorris. She's not very well known, but a friend of mine was introduced to her work through a writing class with Kaveh Akbar. And she shared the poem after another meeting with the pain specialist with me. It meditates on how to have a loving relationship, even an intimate friendship with pain. I was inspired by the poem, which spoke and still speaks to my life situation, and I wanted to write something similar. However, I didn't want pain to be the central character. Instead, I imagined not another meeting with pain, but a surprise encounter with hope, who sometimes drops by unannounced and, thank God, won't leave until we hear her out. So thank you for listening, and I hope hope visits you today and every day. Unannounced guest. Oh, Hope? I wasn't expecting you. Now isn't really a good time. I'm quite busy at the moment. I have things to prepare. I am preparing things, judging things, pointing my finger at people because this matters, and I have to be the one to say it. Could you come back some other time, like when the peach tree I never planted starts to blossom? Or when the sidewalk turns into a tide pool? I should be done with my business by then. Well, since you insist, since there's something in your lark song voice that tastes like a meadow, I guess you can come in for a few minutes. Have a seat over there next to that stack of ledgers. Hope, you are crowding me a little, and the way you smell like jasmine is distracting me. Was that you I saw one afternoon outside the mosque, laying between the stray dog and the smiling blind man? His eyes were so milky, beautiful, but we can talk about that later. Right now, I'm trying to keep track of all these resentments. Someone stacked the cereal bowls out of order, and the meeting ran 20 minutes over. Also, didn't you hear the rumors? They threatened me. They called me dangerous, a predator. They found out I was thirsty and handed me a glass of bleach, hoping I would drink and be drained of all my color. They walked all over her. You saw the scars when you visited her, right? We need a list of every transgression. I absolutely must set the record straight. These things matter, Hope, don't they? They don't? You don't know what you're talking about. You are so wrapped up in your beehive thoughts. Not everything in the world is sweet, Hope. People take more than they need. I guess you're right that some give and grateful eyes, even out of utter emptiness. I felt that way too that morning by the field, but please, could you just let me finish what I'm working on? These records are my area of expertise. I could have a hit list put together in no time flat if you would just stop interfering. Why don't you make yourself some tea? By the time the water boils, I'll have the tallies ready. How many times I have been wronged, how much each time hurt, so that I know how many times to twist the knife and how many eyes to pluck out. I have a good memory, Hope, and I'm good at writing, so I remember and write. Yes, I do remember that night at the donut shop and painting Coreopsis in the driveway, but I have more pressing accounts to detail, Hope. I don't have time to look back on my daughter's first birthday when my father was in good health and we walked the pier in Pacifica. The mountain in Montara doesn't matter now, nor does Sinai or Deauville. The way he carried me into the shower when I couldn't walk, the tablecloth patterned after the ceiling of the blue mosque, the full pot of navy bean soup, but the kissing that never stops, stopped. Hope, don't you see? I am determined to write down everything she could have said instead of that sincere, I'm sorry. I'm trying to describe the devil that took over his eyes when he stood in the doorway with a knife in his hands. We used to play so well as kids. We used to help each other cheat in Monopoly. We walked to school arm in arm for years. It still rains in the summer there. In that place we are from, it stays green. Hope, don't go snooping around in those journals, those other-lunged love letters to no one, mere sour-lipped longings now, transient truths, vagabonds, vagrants. I know what I wrote about redemption. I know what I said about healing. Still, cancer claims, and the fires feast. I know Lucy never became an orphan, and Luke built a new house. Kari, too. I know I was in full bloom, but that season was short, and now I'm withering on the vine. You expect me to believe I'm a whole vineyard? Yes, I am surviving the frost, but Hope, how can you see me shivering even now and still want to talk about the sun? Okay, Hope, since you are so committed to covering me with garlands and filling the cracks with gold, let me level with you. My faith is sun-starved. I hobble on grease-fire feet. My hands are made of barley husks. It's cliffs all the way down. I jump and nothing catches me. I can't catch my breath. You want me to breathe with you? There's that jasmine again, the pink and white, the sidewalk that ran out, the warmth that permanently stained my palms, the sea song at the heart of all my psalms. I'm singing again. The waves are crashing, the boulders are slowly eroding, the sun is speedily setting. It's night, it's dark, I'm dark deep in the belly of the unknown. I groan, I groan, I grow, groan in the deep dark, in the dark. The stars come out, the stars, and hope they start to shout, they sing. Hope.
The Viewless Wings Poetry Podcast is written and produced by James Moorhead. You can follow me on Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at Viewless Wings. Hit subscribe to be notified of every episode of the Viewless Wings Poetry Podcast and spread the word with your poetry community.